Hello, today is Sunday, October 18th, and we will be looking at the 18th chapter in the book of the Acts of the Apostles. In the 18th chapter, we have Paul in the city of Corinth. Now, many of you who are familiar with Christianity know that Corinthians 1 and 2, especially Corinthians 1, chapter 13, the love chapter, very familiar with us, especially at weddings. People read that 13th chapter, and Corinthians is also in 2 Corinthians is where we have the institution of the Lord's Supper in the epistles. It's the only place in the epistles where the full liturgy of the Lord's Supper exists. And so the Corinthians. So Paul visits Corinth. And thusly, that's why he has a letter to the Corinthians. So let's dig in to what it has to say in the 18th chapter. After Paul left Athens, he went to Corinth. So this is Paul in Corinth, and he encounters a couple. Aquila is the husband's name. Priscilla is the wife's name. And they are in Corinth. They are Jews originally from Rome, and they worked together, and they were all tent makers. So I'm assuming Aquila was the tent maker, the man of the couple, and Paul was a tent maker as well. And so essentially they're craftsmen, and they are plying their trade together during the week. And on the weekends, Paul would go to the synagogues and argue the case for Christ. So Timothy and Silas show up. They come to Corinth as well. They follow Paul, and Paul's busy arguing in the temple, and then he gets some backlash, and so he shakes the dust off in front of them in the synagogue. And in that moment, he sort of seems to shake off synagogue arguments for the future. And he says, I will go now to the Gentiles. And it's at this point in chapter 18 where you see Paul, and you recognize that he's also a tent maker. Who knew? And he is going to only go to the Gentiles. So after being encouraged in a vision, he stays in Corinth another year and a half. So he has a very long time there. And of course, that is the relationship that ties him to Corinth to be making more letters and addressing them more. And the Jewish authorities bring Paul before the proconsul who is there. And his name is Gallio. And when they brought him before the other authorities, those authorities threw the case out. They said that he hasn't done anything. He hasn't robbed anybody, he hasn't killed anybody, he hasn't broken our law. He's broken your law maybe, but that doesn't matter to us. So they throw the case out. And but for some reason, it just isn't left there. And Sosthenes gets beaten up by the Greeks in front of the tribunal. And the lead guy, I think his name is Gallio, is that how you pronounce it? He doesn't care. He doesn't see it, and he doesn't care. And so this is a very odd thing, and I'd like to know more about it, and I haven't been able to find anything in my commentaries about it. But there it is. Sosthenes gets beat up in front of the tribunal. And then, moving right along, a lot of action and acts. Paul takes Priscilla and Aquila, and now in this part, Luke puts Priscilla's name first, and the commentary points out that Priscilla's name is listed first, and she's the wife and Aquila is the husband, and so that means something to put the lady's name first, and maybe she had more importance in either the ministry that they were doing, or she had more importance in society than her husband did. They leave. Paul takes them with him to Syria, and they land in Ephesus, where the couple stays, and Paul, after addressing the synagogue, leaves Ephesus and goes on to Caesarea. And then he goes from Caesarea into Jerusalem, visits the council and the believers there. And then he goes down to Antioch. And after a while, it just says that he went from place to place in all of Galatia and Phrygia. Phrygia. Sorry, I put the R in the wrong place. Phrygia. Phrygia. Just ministering. There's no more details about that, but that's what he did after he left Antioch. So then we're introduced to Apollos. Apollos of Alexandria. He has quite a following. He's very eloquent. My translation says he's eloquent. And you'll notice that he's mentioned in the epistles, if you read further on after the book of Acts, that some follow Apollos. And this would be the Apollos he's speaking of. And Apollos has, like I said, quite the following. He preaches exactly what the way is. He has one little thing that he needs tweaked, and Priscilla and Aquila pull him aside and say, listen, you need to fix this part. He willingly accepts, and it seems moves on with what he has to say. And he helped, in my translation, a lot of the believers to believe more. So Apollos has a great ministry for the way, for improving. And what stands out to me about this is that Apollos has a slightly different way of bringing the gospel. And we believe, as the book of Acts does, that the Holy Spirit has imparted this to him, and that this difference makes the whole ministry richer and the whole experience of what it means to be in this Christian community richer, because all of our understandings and experience aren't going to be homogeneous. And we can say that because of what it says here in Acts about the differences among those who were imparting the faith to others and gaining converts. And that says to me that we live in a multiplicity of different ideas about how to live the Christian life, what the faith looks like, and that we ought to be able to live in community together. And that also there's a benefit to our society being pluralistic, that the gospel has fertile soil to grow in an open and pluralistic society. But in a closed and theocratic society, even if that society follows Christianity, it will only be one style of Christianity. It will be Silas's or Paul's or Apollos', or maybe Aquila's, or maybe Stephen's, or one of those leaders along the way. It will only be one style of Christianity. And then if it's a state religion, and we'll see that what comes later, it doesn't come in Acts, but it comes later with Constantine, it becomes something that is ultimately rejected, if not verbally or publicly, but by the heart. And what the Holy Spirit is trying to do is looking for people who are willing to have enough faith to share the gospel heart to heart. And that's what I think Apollos was doing, and I think that's why Priscilla and Aquila helped him, and that's why I think that he is on his way to doing great things for the ministry of the way and the Christian faith. God bless you.